Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening from whatever time zone you may be reaching us today. Thank you for joining. My name is Rebecca Cronin, and I'm one of the Customer Success Managers here with the Altair Data Analytics team. Now, some of you might recognize my voice or name from our onboarding sessions or perhaps these previous sessions, and if you're new, you might have seen my name within the user community. So the Customer Success, we're here as another point of contact for you to reach out at any time with any questions, concerns you may have regarding Altair solutions, as well as if you're unable to get a hold of your account manager. We could also assist you in receiving access to the online user community if you've not joined and participated, or even your Altair One account. Within our user community, it's a great opportunity for you to collaborate with fellow peers, see what others are doing, an opportunity to ask questions to our experts within blog posts in the Monarch Forum. So we're very excited for you to join us today for our Altair Data Analytics Monarch series, Ask the Expert. Our session, or I should say our goal for the session, is to give you this opportunity to cover a topic that those have voted for to review, then leaving open Q&A afterwards. So please feel free to ask your questions. You can raise your hand. You can put it into the chat section, and we will get to it. Now, if it's a question you want to be answered privately, then please make sure you add that comment to answer offline. Otherwise, we're going to share it with those that are in this session today. So again, you'll see on that side control panel, there should be a handout section. It is a copy of today's PowerPoint for your records that you may download. In that PowerPoint contains a list of resources such as how to contact our support, the user community website, and more. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our expert today. It's Steve Caiels. He's one of our senior professional services consultants. He's worked within the industry over 29 years in various technical support roles, with about 20 of that being within DataWatch. Excellent person to work with, colleague. You may have had the opportunity to work with him as well as on some of your project professional service engagements. So at this point, Steve, I hand it over to you. We'll get started with our topic of reviewing the advanced field properties.
Great, thank you very much. Let me just my screen up here. Okay, yep. So as Rebecca mentioned, our topic today is the advanced field options. Those advanced field options are a set of options that apply to extracting data from reports or PDF. They don't really apply to things like CSV or Excel or any sort of structured data sets. They are a report or a PDF type function, and I think we'll see more of that as we go through. So I'm just going to open up a normal file. Some of you may recognize this as being based on our sample data, but it is quite heavily edited. So we, if you wanted to have a mess around with the advanced field options using the same file, we're certainly very happy to supply it. So a couple of things are different. I've got a European date format here, which won't affect anything. But the main thing is I've just got these very long fields down here that I've created just purely to show some of the advanced field options. So we'll take a look at that in a little bit more detail. So first of all, just a quick overview on the advanced field options and how you get to them. I'm just going to build a normal detail template here on what would traditionally be the detail. And we'll create the detail template. I'll put a trap in, the decimal point, for example, and highlight the field. So for those of you that are familiar with Monarch, you'll know this is a standard way we highlight a field. We've not used any advanced field options. I should have mentioned also at the beginning that these advanced field options are available in Monarch Classic, or as we're seeing here, Monarch Data Prep Studio. They have the same name and they work in exactly the same way between the two applications. So the idea of a normal field is we just highlight the sample line, and whatever we highlight is extracted down into our data table. And that works great where it's a single field that we always have on every example of our template. So every line has a description, and you can see we're extracting the description down here as we'd expect. Apart from these sorts of situations that you may have spotted where we have something unusual happening with the field. So this is a typical use of where we need to use the advanced field options, where we've got a field that is sometimes or always a multi-line. It may be things like the field isn't always there or isn't always in the same place, but probably the most common use of advanced field options is where you have these potential multi-line fields. One other field I want to highlight here, just for this quick example, is this media type. This is another example where the field is not consistent. We don't see it on all the other options here. This does not require an advanced field option, but it is an effective field option, so I wanted to quickly mention that here. So if you have the situation where the field is sort of more like a header, but it's a header that appears on the first detail line, and we'd want to assume this CD belonged to all these other 4 lines as well. And then, of course, it goes on to tape and whatever the other media types. If you have this sort of situation, you can fix that just by coming into the copy value from previous record here. And as soon as I tick that, you'll see these values get filled in. So without that ticked, our preview and our prepare window, once we get into the prepare window, will be showing exactly the same as this. Where it's blank as it is in the report. So copy previous values fills in those. We used to call that ditto or assumed ditto, going back to some of the older versions, but it's been copy value from previous record for a little while. This is also available in Monarch Classic. Data Prep Studio also has a ditto function in the prepare window. Once you get to the prepare window itself, the advantage for that is you can then use this functionality even on calculated fields or fields that have come from a database, a CSV or an Excel source. So Data Prep Studio is a little bit more flexible in terms of this ditto function, as we call it. Classic and Data Prep Studio both have the ability to do it here. But that's not really an advanced field option. This advanced section here, let me come back to the detail. This advanced section here is the one we're going to explore in more detail today. And as I mentioned, this is only available in report or PDF data sources. So you can see the advanced section here is split into 2 main subsections. We've got the start field on options, and we will come back to look at this in a little while. But for now, I want to jump onto the end field on options. I would say that probably 90% of the time that we need to go into the advanced field options, it's probably using the end options. And more often than not, there's one specific option that we would use here, typically the blank field values, but I'll come into more detail on these. And I want to do that by using these sort of slightly unusual fields that I've got here, which are very long, unreasonably long, of course, in reality. But these will allow me to go through in sort of a controlled environment and talk about some of the things that aren't so obvious and won't really show up when we use it in a more typical scenario. So ignore all this above it for the moment. I'm just going to do a detail here on these fields, and I've got one field here that carries on for, you can see, a lot of lines, too many lines. In fact, it exceeds the maximum line length for Monarch and for Data Prep Studio, nearly that. So 550 lines is too long, but I want to sort of show the limitations. And then there's another couple of examples here that you can see sort of maybe more realistic, where we've got 10, 2, and 7 lines. So as I'm here, let me use this example right in front of us. The first thing we have to decide when we're extracting a multi-line field is how many fields we want, or how many lines we want to put into our sample. And the most important thing to remember here is that a sample must work for every example of the template you're defining. We're not trying to build a sample here at this stage that works for the longest example or a typical example. It must work for every example. And again, I can show the problems that that you can run into if that's not the case later on. So here we can see we have 2 lines, 10 lines, 550 lines. We can highlight, in theory, up to, I think it's 128 or maybe 256 now lines in a single template. So, I could create a template long enough to take care of these. I certainly can't create a template long enough to take care of this. But even if I try and do this here, you can see this is a 10-line sample. This is going to cause a problem. It's going to re-trigger the detail on this line here where it says 1. I'm going to use 1 as my trap. And because it's going to re-trigger the template here, it's going to already be in that trigger template when it comes down to the third example. So the problem with selecting these sections too large is that when they overlap, they will stop the overlapped occurrence of the template from being extracted. So if I knew that I always had at least a 2-line field, I could in theory do a 2-line sample, but there's no real advantage. What we would typically always do is just to do a single line sample, and then we'll use the advanced field options to take care of how long this field may or may not extend down through the report. So I'll come back to this one. Doesn't matter which one I use as the sample. It's just going to be a single line sample, even though we've got multi-line fields. And I'm going to recreate my detailed template. I deleted the other template. I'm going to trap on the word 1 and then just highlight a big long field here. So you can see what it's done at the moment. Let me try and highlight that again. That didn't highlight. That's because I'm using the wrong section. Sorry, let me put it in the right section. So I've highlighted the field here, and you can see at the moment it's created this field here. I'll call it temp. And we've got 4 occurrences of that field, and it's an absolutely standard field. It's not using any advanced field options. As we'd expect, we only get the actual line we've highlighted. So what I'm now going to do is to come onto that field, just click on it anywhere, just being careful not to move the mouse so that I accidentally re-highlight it. So I've just selected that field and then into the advanced option. As I mentioned, I'll come back to the start field on options for a moment or two, but we can see the field is starting in the correct place on every example. So clearly there's nothing we need to change for the starting options. But I will come down to the end field on options, and we'll just work through these one by one, although it's pretty much always the third one that we end up going for, I'd say. I guess the most straightforward one is the first option here, the line count. And this is useful if you always have a field that wraps around onto, say, 2 lines. So it's not really super relevant for this example here. But if we come back up to the report here, you can see here we have a 2-line description. So if we always had a 2-line description, then the line count would work well. A couple of extra things to point out here. You can see it wraps around. We've got the 1 and the 2. When I selected that option, if we use any of the advanced field options, there is a little visual bug or undocumented feature, I think I meant to call it, in Data Prep Studio. You can see now we've only got 3 preview lines. If I check this back to 1, we'll get the 4 preview lines back here. This has been reported and it will be resolved in the next version. The good news is, even if we don't see it in the preview here, if I do quickly accept this and we get into the preview, get into the actual data, the prepare window, you can see the prepare window correctly has all 4 lines as we expect. So it is purely a data preview issue. But whenever you use an advanced field option, you will lose the last record of your data preview. So yeah, the fixed line count, I think, is relatively straightforward. We've got a maximum of 99. You see, if I try and expand beyond that, it won't let me click. So a maximum of 99 lines will be extracted using the line count. One other sort of basic overview point that I wanted to point out, which is why I'm using this sample data really. We will only see the first, I think, 20 lines or so in the preview. But if I accept this, even though I'm extracting 99 lines from my field options, if I accept this and expand it, let's just try and maximize this a bit and move this around. Trying to get to my window to maximize it here. I don't know why it's not letting me do that. Okay, I won't spend too much time on that. So you can see that we're extracting a lot of data here. If I do the right click and collapse, which is quite often an option that we would use in our when we're doing these advanced field options, the right click, clean, collapse basically tries to put everything onto a single line. It'll still wrap around to a certain extent for display purposes, but it'll get rid of it, stop everything being on separate lines. So if I collapse this, you can see now that we're getting much more data available to look at. But even though we know we're extracting 99 or attempting to extract 99 rows from the report window, you can see I'm only going up to row 63 here. The reason for that is that if we come back into the preview, into the edit, sorry, By default, these fields are character type, and a character has a maximum length of 254 characters. So it's trying to extract the data. And if I come down to that section, and we'll see the 99 rows being highlighted. So it is trying to extract 99 rows, but it's running out of character space on, coincidentally, row 63. So quite often, if you have the sort of a very long field like this, you'll also need to change that character type to a memo field. And we'll now see that we are extracting, I'll just expand that vertically as well. We're now extracting down to the 99 rows, which is the limit of the field option that I've used there. So just wanted to mention that memo field type, which can be useful. So the line count is useful if there's a static number of lines. I'll skip over this non-blank preceding string and come back to that in a moment. I just wanted to use some other options here. Blank field values, there we go, couldn't get the mouse on it. So blank field values is the most common option to go for, I think. And what blank field values will do, and we'll see this in more detail in a sort of a more natural scenario when we go back to put this into practice on the actual report at the top of the page. But what blank field values will do is it will look at the entire width of the field, and it will look down line by line until it gets to a blank. Now, I'll go into this in more detail on the report, but I just wanted to quickly show that this is sort of a dynamic option, which is typically more useful than a static line count. The reason I also wanted to use these fields is to talk about this any template hit. This any template hit is sort of a default action. So no matter what you choose up above it, it's always going to also be doing this sort of any template hit. And actually, there's another default sort of terminating action that we have in there as well. So if I go to any template hits, what this is going to do is it's going to keep on going all the way down through the report until one of two things happens. Either it's going to get to the next template. So although we can't actually see it working here, if we look at the prepare window, we would see that it is working. So this field is extracted all the way down to the next template, and then it will stop. And then this one's extracted all the way down to the next template. So for all these, it's going to be working great. But we can see, even though we're using any template hit, we might expect now the advanced field options on this field to be coming all the way down and bumping into this one. But there's another condition that will always stop the highlights. And if I scroll up through the report, we'll see where it's stopping. So at the moment, it's stopping on line 146, which is a sort of a coincidental number almost. It's not relevant that it's the 146th line. What is relevant is that we also have this page break character. So this character is something that's not in the report itself. It's something that Monarch has put in for us. To help us with the parsing techniques, to help us with advanced field options and using page calculated fields and all that sort of thing. There is a default page length. So if your report has page control codes in there, it will read them and it will display them. If your report does not have page control codes, then they will be inserted according to your default options. And the standard default option is to insert a page break every 100 lines. So what's happening is there's a page break. So here, for example, this just happens to be 100 lines into the report. It doesn't really mean anything specific. I guess that's the first one. So yeah, if we counted down 100 lines, we get to our first page break here. And then another 100 lines further down, just sort of randomly in the field, we get to another one, and so on down through the report. And the field options, the advanced field options, will all stop when they hit their second page break. I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure of the technical reasons as to why that's the case. I guess there's something built into the software itself, into the logic of the software that does that and means that has to be the case. But you can see with the start of the field, we come down, it'll go through the first page break, and it'll then carry on coming down, and it will stop when it gets to the second page break. So at the moment, we're seeing 146 lines extracted, even though we're only using the any template hit, which you might think would come all the way down to the next template. We can change the number of lines per page. If I go up to my settings in the top right-hand corner and go to input, you can see the default that we'll have when we install Monarch is to insert a page break every 100 lines. we can max that up to 256. So now I'm going to be extracting many more lines. We start at the top of the report, we now go down 256 lines. So the first page break is actually all the way down in this field already, and it happens to be here on 109. And now if we go another 256 lines beyond that, we'll get down to our second page break, and it's just, again, sort of randomly on 365. So there is an arbitrary limit of 512 lines in theory, but you'll only get the 512 lines if you can exactly get the page break at the top of the field. So I think the best we could do here, we're sort of wasting a load of space and that we maybe want to extract from, because this page break that we've got is all the way up here somewhere, sorry, all the way at the top of the report even. So really what I want to do is I want to try and re-trigger the page break as close to the top of the field as I can. Or in theory, I could put a page break on the one line itself, but I think it makes more sense to put a page break here. And we can do that by inserting a page break template. So I think the best we can get here is to do a new template page header, trapping on the word page, for example. I'm not going to extract any data here, but what we'll now see is, this is now putting in a page break every time we come to a new report page. So at least I'm now re-triggering my count just above the field, and that gives me now the maximum number of lines. So it's going to be close to the sort of 512 maximum. All I'm losing is the 4 lines above that happen to be in that page header section. So to be honest, these don't generally get in the way. I mean, normally we're typically talking of a field that might extend, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, not lines in the hundreds. So although this is a limitation, I don't think it's ever caused me a limitation in the real world. So I wanted to go in and just explain that any template hit using these sample fields, but obviously that's not the real world. So let's delete these and see how they work in the real world by coming back to the main part of the report. So now we can see we've got this 2-line sample here. There's a couple of 2-line descriptions. There's one here and there's one here. And we now know that the advanced field options, we saw there was a blank field values, advanced field options, which we can imagine is going to work great here. But without knowing that it's also going to stop when it hits a template, you might be tempted to think the blank field values will not work here. But it is. So let's just go through and demonstrate that. So remember the first thing we need to decide is how many lines I want to extract for my detail template. And it must be a sample that's going to work for every example of the detail. So we can illustrate here what happens if you make the wrong choice here. So I'm going to choose a 2-line sample incorrectly because I maybe know there are 2-line descriptions. So if I do a 2-line sample and create a detail template, put my trap in, and then highlight any of the fields. Let's just do it on the label number to start with. You can see what's happening is every second label number is being missed out. So what's happening is my 2-line sample is being triggered on the decimal. So these 2 lines are both part of the first occurrence of the detail template, and it's therefore able to extract the label number, and we can see it here. Because this second detail is consumed by my first sample, I'm not able to re-trigger it, and it won't extract this. You can see the 420831 is not in my data table, and therefore will not be in my prepare window. So this is a problem that we have to fix here. So allowing for this in the sample is a bad idea. And even if it was a good idea, it doesn't really give us any advantage. So remember, what we want to do is to choose a sample that works for every record. So I'll choose that same sample record, but I'm only going to highlight 1 line of the sample. I could equally choose the Bartok line, but just for consistency, I'll choose this Mendelssohn line. So a single line sample, right click, create the detail template, put my trap in just as I did before. Looks pretty much the same at this stage. We've got the chevrons on all the lines and it's all looking okay. But the big difference now is when I highlight these fields, because I'm re-triggering the detail on every line, it's correctly extracting the field from every line. Now, of course, that leaves us to extract the field that requires the advanced field options. So on the general tab here, I'm going to call it DESC for description. and then onto the Advanced tab, and now we need to change this. So we can use actually quite a few of the options here, to be honest. Most of them are going to work. I think some are more logical than others, but we could, for example, use a line count of 2. And although you might think that's not going to work, remember, it's always going to stop when it bumps into the next template. So taking this first line, it's going to try and get down to the second line because I've told it to use a line count of 2, but it's immediately going to give up because this is defined as a separate template. So you can see actually this is working okay, and it is highlighting okay. Where it maybe doesn't look quite so good is where you've got blank lines underneath it, but they're blank anyway, so it doesn't matter. But of course, if I go up to a line count of 3, for example, then that is going to cause an issue because now we're coming down to something that isn't a template at the moment. And we'll see on this Scaletti line, if I can scroll down a bit, now we're starting to extract data that we don't want to extract. So, this isn't, I think, is there a question there? Just getting some, not sure where that is. Hopefully it's not coming through on the broadcast. So we can see that we don't really want to use this line count of 3 unless it's a relevant option. So the option that normally works is this blank field values. This is, I would say, 9 times out of 10 the option to go for. And what blank field values is going to do is it's going to extract the entire width of the field. It'll try and look down the line below it, and it will give up on one of those preconditions. Either it will give up when it bumps into the template below, which is what's happening most of the time, or in theory it would give up when it got to the second page break, which of course isn't going to happen in this situation. Or of course it's going to give up when we get to the option that we've actually specified. So in this case, it's going to come across, it's going to find the entire width of the field is blank, and it's going to stop highlighting it on the line above it. So blank field values is 9 times out of 10 the option to go for. And that's working great. Either there's a blank line or it's bumping into the detail below. Just going to quickly check the questions. I don't see any questions there.
We have no.
Yeah.
What do you got a question on?
Is that you, Rebecca? I can hear someone talking.
No, that's not me.
No.
I'm trying to see.
Okay.
No, it's just Craig. We're having a hard time getting in on your go-to webinar meeting. That's all.
Okay. But pop a message in the chat if you have a question there, and one of my colleagues hopefully will be able to help you out. Okay, so yeah, that's the blank field values, and that's more often than not the option that's going to do the trick. I won't highlight too many more of the fields here. I'll just quickly remind you about the other option we've got is the ditto. So the sample I've chosen here is probably not the best sample in terms of highlighting all the fields, because you can see this Mendelssohn line here does not actually have a media type. But just to sort of prove a point here, I can still highlight it here. So if it did have a media type, that's where it would be. And then I can still come in here and on the General tab, use the copy value from previous record. So the sample doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to allow you to highlight the fields that you want there. So I'll leave it as that is for those 3 options, and then I'll move on to this customer name and address field to go through the advanced field options in a little bit more detail. So that's the detail taken care of. I'm just going to do a new append template here. And again, I've only selected a single line, so we're going to use the advanced field options to take care of how long the field is. Going to trap on customer. The traps are not case sensitive, so that's good enough for a quick trap for the purposes of this. And now we can see we've got the customer name here extracted. Of course, only a single line customer, and no advanced field options. Now, just to make this a bit easier to read, what you can see we've got at the moment is the customer is being repeated for every detail. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to preview these field options. So I'm just going to delete the detail template so we no longer see all the descriptions and everything. And then just make what would normally be an append, I'm going to make that the detail, just so we can see a bit more of a concise preview of what's going on here. But obviously, if I did leave that as an append, then whatever we're seeing here would have been appended to every detail line. So let's have a look at the advanced field options here. Again, we've got the static line count. We can see that working. We can see the fourth record disappearing, that little visual issue that we've got here on the advanced field options, but it is in the table. So line count really isn't relevant here because the address is not on a consistent number of lines. We can use the blank field values. So you see what blank field values is doing in this case is it's also extracting the contact. So the blank field value, remember, it looks at the entire width of the field and it looks down line by line until the entire width of that field is blank, or until it bumps into a template, or until it gets to the second page break. But I think in this case, every time it's going to come to a blank line. One option we have on the blank field values you can see here is this number that we can scroll between 1 and 2. That's the number of consecutive blank lines to look for. So if I scroll down to the third address here, you can see that the address actually has a blank field value within it. So of course the blank field values is seeing this field or seeing this blank line and it's stopping highlighting on the line above it. We can, if we wish, look for 2 consecutive blank lines before it stops highlighting the field. So just by changing that to 2, you can see it skips over the first one, carries on going again, and then it finds the first blank line and then the second blank line, and it stops highlighting it on the line above it. So one artifact of this is every field will have a blank line below it highlighted, but by its very nature, we know that's going to be blank. So it's not going to be extracting rogue data that you don't want in the table. So blank field values is useful if you do want to extract the contact if it's there, and we have the option of 1 or 2 consecutive blank lines. If you didn't want to extract the contact, then we can use this end of left justification option. And what that does is it just looks down the left-hand margin at the first column, and if there's a blank in that first column, in other words, if the justification is broken, then it stops highlighting it on the line above it. So you can see this is an advantage in that it now no longer brings in the contact. The disadvantage is we don't have an option of 1 or 2 consecutive blanks of justification. So there would be no way of getting it to skip over this and bring in the postcode. So we'd have to use blank field values here and then maybe do some tidying up in the prepare window to get rid of the contact if we didn't want it. So that's the blank field values and the end left justification. Let me come back to the non-blank preceding string, which is probably the least common option. I think I've literally only used this 2 or 3 times in 30 odd years of using Monarch, so very unusual to use it. But what the blank field and the non-blank preceding string will do is it will look for up to 9 characters. So I'll set it to 3 as an example, although I think they all pretty much do the same thing here. So this is now looking for 3 characters before the beginning of the field, and it's stopping if anything comes into that exclusion zone. So it doesn't include the first line because the assumption is there's going to be a field tag, just like there is here on the first line. So from the second line down, it's looking down 3 characters, and as soon as something comes into that 3-character exclusion zone, you can see it stops highlighting it on the line above it. So not really a useful option here, although it sort of works, but I'm sure we'd be better off using blank field values or end of left justification. But the non-blank preceding string is looking at this section of the report, up to 10 characters as a maximum. And that's it. That's the end field on options. Just checking questions.
We have a question, Steve.
Yes, with floating templates. That's a good question. In the latest version,
so let's repeat that question. So the question for everyone is, do the advanced field options work as easily with floating templates?
Yeah, so they do, but you have to sort of take into account how the field is floating. So if I just bring up Notepad, for example, so if you have a field, let me copy and paste this into Notepad. So in this situation here, I could use the floating trap, and you know, let's say if my fields were floating around like this. So this would be okay for the floating trap because the second line floats with the first line. Where it won't work so well is if the wraparound doesn't float in line with the first field. So what would happen here is we would highlight this section of the field, and then it would only carry on looking down through that section. It wouldn't bring this bit before it. So it depends how the multi-line is working as to whether the floating trap is going to be successful or not. But in general terms, yes, it will work. And there's a second question: when you trap the data, how and when do you specify if the field is alpha, numeric, blank, or non-blank? So, not sure I fully understand the question, to be honest, but so the field type is specified here, where we have character, numeric, date, and memo. These here are the trap characters. So what I did on my detail, let me come back in and do that detail again, is I used what we called a specific trap character. So I just used the decimal point. So that's something that we can type on the keyboard, and that decimal point works well because every line contains the decimal in that column, and there's no drifting, and there's no, we're never seeing a character other than the period. Where that doesn't work so well is if we have things like numerics or blanks. So if we imagine we didn't have those two columns in this report, let's consider we only have these first four columns in terms of trapping. There are no specific trap characters available here. So what I'd then have to do is I'd have to start using a pattern of wildcards, and I'd need to say something like, I've got a numeric in the quantity column. A numeric, of course, is just a 0 through to 9. It doesn't include any punctuation, doesn't include any currency symbols or anything like that. It's a straightforward 0 through to 9. So you can see it's picking up all the detail lines, which is good news, but it's also picking up the phone line because coincidentally that contains a numeric in that column. So I can supplement the numeric and say, actually, I only want the lines where it's a numeric immediately followed by a blank. And now I'm no longer getting this phone number line because it's not blank in that column. Or we could even say I want numeric followed by 2 blanks, followed by an alpha. And that's going to work great as long as these are all composers that start with an alphabetical character, and I don't have 10cc or something like that in there. Then that's going to work. If I did have 10cc and those sorts of numeric names, then I could use the non-blank instead of the alpha, and a non-blank is anything other than a space. So that's just a very quick overview. I think we do occasionally do sessions on the traps specifically where we could go into that in a lot more detail. But I don't know if that answers your question, but feel free to pop another question in there, and I'll keep an eye on that. So just to review the advanced field options as we're in here. So remember, you just highlight the field, go to advanced, use the option you want, and that's literally it. That's all you have to do. The preview here, you can see it's formatted exactly the same as our reports. When we go into the preview window, this is because I deleted all my templates, so excuse me for that a second. When we go into the preview window, I've already got the change there. By default, you will see the same that you see in your preview, where multi-line fields are wrapped onto multi-lines in your data table. If you want to correct that, then you do a right-click, clean, collapse. And you can see now it brings it down onto a single line. Okay, so there's another question here. Is there any option or feature to modify an output file name based on the data in the column? So in the desktop product, no. We do have an automator, a server-based product called Automator, and that is one of the features. So you can base it on the contents of a column. You can base it on a table name, the name of a filter, the name of a summary, or you can even sort of set variables based on anything you like and base it on the name of a variable. So there is a server-based feature that will allow you to do that. But we don't have it in the desktop product. I'm just going to check that that is absolutely the case. So when we are specifying the name of the table, Excel table name, yes. So in the server-based product, you can see here it's static, so we just have to manually type in the table name. In the server-based product, there's a little sort of macro button here that we can click on that allows us to do things like first value of a field, name of filter, date and time, sequential numbers, all sorts of things in the server-based product. but not in the desktop product. Okay, so that's the start field on options. Just looking at the time here, let me move on to the end field on options. Sorry, the start field on options. I'm going to bring in a new report here. These don't get used so often, I don't think, but they are really useful. So the start field on options are really great where we have sort of variable sections within a report. So you can see this report here is broken into two sections. We've got the employee information, and that's static. That's always got the same fields in the same place. It's always a 3-line address. Nothing drifts around and everything's consistent. But the payroll elections, you can see, are inconsistent. So let me just quickly bring in the detail here, and I don't need to use any advanced options on this. I'm just going to bring in basically one field here so that we got a reference in our preview. So again, it's a very small report. We've only got 3 employees in this report. And the payroll elections, you can see, are different for each employee. So what we would normally do is we'd either do this as part of the detail itself, or even if we wanted to, we could bring it in as a footer. So I'm going to do this as a separate template as a footer. We'd highlight the section, and then we do a new template. It's a footer because it's below the detail. Trap on something that's consistent. So they all have payroll elections, but we don't know what the elections are. Now, of course, if I highlight this section 125 here, you can see this is highlighting the section 125 on the sample, as we'd expect, and it sort of looks like it's working okay here. Let me call this section 125. But the problem we've got is that this section is inconsistent, so we can't tell here. But if we scroll down, you can see the second employee, actually the section 125 is a line further down. It's the second election. So what looks like the section 125 is actually the LTD. And on the first example, we can see the LTD is the third sample down, the third election down. The fourth record, it's way down, much further down, and they don't have an LTD election. So you can see there's a lot of inconsistency, both in terms of the number of the election and whether the election actually exists or not. The advanced field options will take care of this really nicely for us. So we go on to the advanced field option. Rather than highlighting the field on line number 1, this one is a little bit strange. It actually refers to the line of the field rather than the line of the sample, but it's only a reference, it doesn't really matter. So rather than highlighting it on the line we've selected, we can highlight it if and when we find a preceding string of whatever tag we want to put in here. So because I'm highlighting the section 125 line, I can use a preceding string of section 125. And you can see that seems to make no difference at all to the first one. It's still highlighting it exactly where we had it in our sample, but it's now snapped down. You can see that, you remember the highlight was here on this LTD line. It's now using this option and it's snapping it down to the section 125 line. Here it's snapping it all the way down to the 5th line. If I choose one that doesn't exist, so let's do the medical election, for example. Again, I can highlight the field, go to the preceding string, do a medical election, and now you can see this one's blank. So it's found medical on the first record in the place we've highlighted it. It doesn't find medical on the second record, and then it gives up looking when it gets to the next template. So here you can see it snapped down to the medical. So I'm sort of running out of time a little bit. No, I'm okay. I've got a few more minutes. So this one's really useful in terms of extracting fields where we have inconsistencies. And it's unusual because we've now broken the relationship between the field where we're highlighting it and the field we're extracting. We've highlighted it on the 3rd line of the sample here, but we're actually extracting it on the 4th line or the 8th or 9th line, whatever it is down here. So this means, and this can be really useful, this means we can actually use any line at all, any free line to extract a field. So if I want to highlight my LTD, of course I can highlight the LTD here on the LTD sample line, but I don't have to because it's the preceding string that's going to control it. So I can, for example, highlight it up here on this spare line, and then on the preceding string, type in the LTD as the preceding string, And now you can see it snapped it down to the correct position. So even though I'm highlighting it on the second line here, it's going to highlight it on the relevant line of my sample. And where we don't have the LTD, you can see it leaves it blank. So this means I can actually, even though I can only see 3 elections here, I can actually extract 5 payroll elections. Now I've done all these 3, but we know we've also got, for example, a pension election. So at the moment, it's highlighting it on the very top line of the sample. As soon as I use the preceding string and start typing the word pension, you'll see it now disappears from the line it's highlighted on, and it snaps down to the correct line if it's there. When I run out, let's say I've used all these 5, all I do is I say, okay, I need some more. I just do another 5-line highlight. I do another footer template. I did that wrong, sorry. Let's try that again. Highlight the section. Well, I'm not sure. I think I clicked in the wrong section now. I'm just going to do a replace sample text. So we just basically build another 5-line section, and then I can start doing another 5 elections here if I want to. So you can see using that advanced field options means you can be much more efficient in grabbing data. And it's really useful in situations where the fields don't always exist. Just to contrast that, the other way of doing it, you may be thinking about you're trying to do a footer for each election type. Well, there's 2 issues for that. If I just delete these 2, so you see we can actually, as we saw there, we can extract 10 fields using those 2 group footers. And it's reliable in that if they don't have their own election, then it doesn't cause any problem. If I try and do that using a footer, so let's go for one where we know they don't always have an election. If I try and do medical footer here, right click, create template, group footer, trap on the word medical, highlight the election. So that's going to work great for this employee that does have a medical election, but you can see the employee above it has inherited the wrong election. So the way a footer is designed to work really, if I just open up this in Notepad for a second, a footer is designed to be something like this, where you have a building number that's designed to belong to all the details above it. Clearly, that's not the situation we've got here. So you have to be very careful using a footer where it's not designed to belong to a lot of details above it. Now we can get over this. We can use the clearing template and clear this footer template every time we get to the next detail. And you can see that sort of, that tidies it up a little bit. We can, we can get rid of the word null in the options or in the prepare window. But you can see that stopped the incorrect extraction, which is the main thing. But then we've only got 20 templates to use. So, this is a much less efficient way. We've got to do a different template for every election and then remember to clear it on the detail each side. So the advanced field options, the start field on, I think is possibly maybe a little bit underutilized. It's a really useful set of fields. Preceding string, I think, is the only one I've ever used, to be honest. String anywhere on previous line, that would be useful if you have the situation where you had the name of the election, but then the field was actually, the data was actually underneath it. You would use anywhere in this previous line rather than the preceding string. After last defined field in template, this one I've actually been in conversations with our product team on this, because I think there's possibly a little quirk. I've never had to use it, but I think if we come back to the first one, and I'm just going to create a quick template here. So I'm going to do a 2-line template. No, I'll do a single line template. No, sorry, I'll do a 2-line template. Create a footer and append, sorry. Drop on customer. So the way I believe it's designed to work is if I use the advanced field options on here and use the blank field values, use the end of left justification. I know we do have that issue on the address down here with the blank line, but ignoring that for a moment, what I think the advanced field option for after last field template should allow us to do is to extract a template that always immediately comes in below wherever the previous field has finished. So I should be able to highlight a field here, and then in the start field on options, go to after last defined field in template. But what you can see is actually doing, and it's done this since version 10 of Monarch. So it might be me misunderstanding it, and I've not had a chance to clarify that yet. But you can see this is now actually snapping down to a line lower than, to be honest, I would expect it to. So keep an eye, if this is something you think is useful, keep an eye on this option. And it may be in the future that we get an option here to snap it, to the line or to one line below or something like that. It's something we're working on. But that's what it's meant to do. That's what it's designed to do. Is it sort of dynamically moves the field depending on how long the field is above it. So you see the principle, but so I think we may need to change that a little bit. And that brings us to the end of the advanced field options. Let me just check. I think there was another question that I think's been answered in the chat about recordings. I don't see any new questions. There was a quick pre-registered question which I can cover very quickly, because again it's a theoretical answer. And the question was related to whether you can append tables that change in format. So let me just make this name and election. So if you imagine you're trying to sort of create an ongoing data set, and you've got data tables, and the data table is the same format every single time, then you can use an export, and in the export options, you can append data to an existing table. So where we have when file exists, you have the option to append data. If you want to append data using this technique, then the data you're appending to must be in the same format as the data table you're trying to append. So the question was whether you can append dissimilar data formats. So the answer is no if you're using this append option here, but there is also an append within Data Prep Studio. So if I wanted to append these two data tables, for example, then I can do that. I can just select the two data tables. I can do a right click, create new append, and now I'm free to do any mapping I like here. I know in terms of data, it makes no sense to do this, but you can see if you're editing an append manually or creating the append manually, you have total freedom over how you wish to append that. And then I would need to output the original one on this one. So you see this data table, I should have ticked the other two as well, sorry, but this data table is actually extracted, and of course we've got nulls here because we've got a blank field there, so I should have ticked all these. So yes, in theory it does work. In practice, obviously on this data set, it's not making a lot of sense, but hopefully that answers the question. Okay, I don't see any new questions. So Rebecca, do you want me to bring the closing slides up?
Yeah, well, let's, what we could do is launch the poll question. So let me get that launched right now. So if you're at a maximum full screen, you might have to minimize to select a response. So voting for our topic for March, would you want to have a review of Report Warehouse, a Monarch server component? Would you like to review the Data Prep Studio summary enhancements? Or would we like to review the pivot and unpivot transform functions? And if none of these options are of interest, you could always select the other. And then please make sure, though, if you select other, to add that suggestion in the what else can we help improve question. And we'll add that topic to our following session to vote upon. So you'll notice you'll have just the opportunity to select one. So select which important one, and these questions do roll over. So if we don't cover it for the next session, they'll remain there until the following. And I see we're almost at the full capacity of voting. So we'll typically do a countdown. So this is your chance to select your option. We'll do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. And for our next topic, it will be review the pivot and unpivot transform functions. And yep, so in our closing slides here, basically, again, if you did not get a chance to download a copy, you'll find this in the handout section. You can see the following helpful resources. How to contact our support is right within the homepage of our user community site. Within that community, thank you, Steve. So you can see here the ability to create a case or contact support. And in fact, in the upper right under your name, they'll see cases and you have create a product case. We go to the next slide. And so in the community, there is the forums, users, and groups. You'll see the Monarch forum group. Encourage you to subscribe. What this does is when someone posts a new blog or we make an announcement, you'll receive an email notification. So you then have the option to dive further into that link, or you could disregard the email. Go to the next slide. Documentation, great resource, Monarch Help Guide. So you're going to see all of Altair's products. You'd want to filter down for the Monarch product specific, and then you can be able to review those documentation links. Altair Exchange, if you don't know, we are up to about 2,600 now, pre-built models and workspaces for various systems. So Steve, if you go to the next one, and there's actually a direct link to those various systems in the Monarch forum. One of the little highlight boxes shows up. It says, you know, Oracle, SAP, ADP. So again, it's a starting point for you to leverage. 95% of the time, it's going to produce what you might need from those particular reports and items. Just note, every now and then, having that knowledge of modifying the templates, because maybe there's not enough fields or too many fields, you would then custom it to your needs. The next slide. So in here, this is how to contact our e-learning link, which I think it'll show further. Yep, so in our LMS, again, using your same Altair One login, grabs you into this section. You can search for live courses. So if you go to the next slide, Steve will show. Currently, as of 2024, we're not hosting live Monarch courses. Attendance was really slow. It was like 2 to 3 at the max, and we had to cancel a couple of sessions we were offering in both time zones in the EMEA and American time region. So right now we're leveraging the e-learning modules. So again, go to Explore Courses and search for Monarch, and you'll see the different courses available. There's even one for a Monarch certification where you can then earn a LinkedIn badge to attach to your name. So next slide. So Marketplace, it's our latest link to the latest software. So we are at version 2023.1. So that's where you can make sure to go grab that latest. So the slide I know shows 2022. So again, just filter for the data analytics suite and you can download the latest Monarch. Installation though will require admin rights, so you'll probably have to leverage your own IT team. If your organization has not had the opportunity to leverage a complimentary onboarding session, please feel free to leverage that. It's just a quick highlighted overview of the Data Prep Studio and kind of these resources that we touched on. And upon that, you do have a complimentary working session that you could take advantage of. And upcoming session, we'll see the next slide, Steve will show. Oh, this is actually a review of Altair Monarch. If you want to earn a gift card, Gartner Peer Insights, you can select that link or the barcode. And I think the next slide will have the schedule. Oh, must be missing the schedule. So our next session is the 3rd Tuesday of the month. So that will be on March 19th. And again, our topic will be the pivot unpivot. So thank you all. Apologize we went a little bit over. We'll try to get this recording. Apologize for the delay on the other ones. We'll try to get it as soon as we can within the KB articles within the community. That's all I have. Thank you very much. Steve, thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.